Hey everyone, ready for a deep dive? We're going to be talking about resumes today.
Resumes.
Yeah, I know. Not the most exciting topic at first glance,
Okay.
but trust me, there's a lot more to it than just listing out where you worked.
Oh, absolutely.
We're going to uncover some strategies, some things you can try that can really make your resume stand out.
Definitely. I think most people think of resumes as kind of a chore, like something they have to do.
Right.
But I think a good way to look at it is as an opportunity. Like it's your chance to really show off your skills and what makes you unique.
Yeah, like a personal marketing campaign almost.
Exactly.
You're trying to sell yourself to these companies.
And just like any marketing campaign, it needs a strategy.
Okay, so where do we even start with that?
Well, I think the first step is understanding the different resume formats, like chronological, functional, hybrid.
Okay, break those down for me. What are the differences? Which one's better?
Well, chronological is the most traditional, I think. You basically list your work experience in reverse order. So starting with your most recent job and going back from there.
Makes sense. So if you've been steadily climbing the ladder in the same field.
Exactly. It shows a clear progression.
Okay, but what if you maybe switched careers a few times
Yeah.
or took some time off?
Right. So in those cases, you might want to consider a functional resume.
Okay.
This format focuses more on your skills and abilities. So let's say you've had a bunch of different jobs in different industries, but there's a common thread of, say, project management or leadership.
Right.
You can highlight those core skills, even if your job titles don't scream, project manager or whatever.
Oh, that's clever. So it's less about the specific jobs and more about what you can actually do.
Exactly.
Okay, and then what was that last one? A hybrid.
Yeah, so a hybrid resume kind of combines the best of both worlds. Maybe you start with a quick summary of your key skills and then go into a brief chronological work history.
Oh, okay. So you get a little bit of everything.
Exactly.
All right, so we figured out the format, but how do we make the actual content really shine?
Yeah. So I think this is where it becomes less about just listing things and more about storytelling.
Hmm,
Like each bullet point in your work experience section should be like a mini narrative, showing not just what you did, but the impact you made.
I see.
So instead of just saying manage social media accounts, you could say something like grew social media following by 30% through targeted content creation.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's way better. It's not just what you did, it's what you achieved.
Exactly.
Okay, so it's all about being specific and showing results.
And don't forget about using strong action verbs too. Like instead of saying responsible for, try using verbs like led, managed, developed, words that really show you took charge and made things happen.
Gotcha. So it's not just what we did, but how we describe it.
Exactly. And whenever possible, quantify your achievements. Did you save the company money? Improve efficiency? Use numbers to really demonstrate that impact.
This is great. So we're taking those kind of generic bullet points and turning them into power statements.
Precisely. Now, we've talked a lot about the content of the resume, but there's another aspect that I think is really important, and that's the visual presentation.
Really, I've always just thought of resumes as black text on a white page.
Yes.
Is there really much you can do to make them visually appealing?
Oh, absolutely. You don't want to go overboard with crazy graphics or anything, but there are some subtle things you can do to make it more readable and just stand out in a good way.
Oh, interesting. Like what?
Well, one thing you can try is incorporating some color, like a really subtle color palette, just to highlight certain sections or headings.
Okay.
So maybe you use a light gray background for your skills section
Hmm.
or a thin blue line to separate different sections.
Gotcha. So it's just little touches to make it more visually interesting.
Yeah. Exactly. You can also play around with font sizes and weights, like maybe your name and the section headings are a bit larger and bolder than the body text.
Ah, so it's kind of like using headlines and subheadings in
Yeah.
an article, right?
Exactly. It makes it easier for the hiring manager to skim through and quickly see what's important.
Right, right.
And speaking of making it easy to read, let's talk about bullet points.
Oh, yeah. Love a good bullet point.
Avoid big blocks of text, Break up your experience into those nice, concise bullet points.
Yeah, it's much easier to digest that way. And it helps to highlight those achievements and quantify your results like we were talking about before.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to use white space, too. A cluttered resume can be overwhelming. Give it some breathing room. Make it more inviting to look at.
Totally. I've seen resumes that are just a wall of text. It's kind of intimidating.
Right.
So it's all about finding that balance, I guess.
Exactly.
Now, earlier we talked about tailoring your resume for each specific job you apply for. Are there any visual things we can do to kind of enhance that tailoring?
Yeah, so one really effective strategy is to mirror the language used in the job description.
Oh,
So if they're looking for someone with, excellent communication skills and proven experience in project management, make sure those exact phrases are in your resume, even if you've worded them differently in the
so it's
past.
almost like you're speaking their language, showing them you really understand what they're looking for.
Exactly. And another thing you can do is reorder your bullet points to prioritize the most relevant achievements for each job. So put the most impressive and relevant stuff first.
So even if it wasn't like chronologically your most recent accomplishment, if it's relevant to that specific job, you bump it up.
Exactly.
It's so smart.
You want to highlight the experience that's most relevant to the job you're applying for.
Now, I have a question about something that usually goes along with the resume, the dreaded cover letter. Are those still like a thing?
Yeah, that's a good question. Um, some people might say cover letters are outdated, but I think they can still be really valuable, especially for certain industries or roles.
So it's not just a formality, like there's an actual purpose to them.
Absolutely. A well-written cover letter can be a great way to introduce yourself, explain your motivations, kind of go beyond what's on the resume.
So it's like you get to tell your story in a more personal way.
Exactly. It's a chance to showcase your personality a bit more, which you can't really do on a resume.
Okay, I'm starting to see the appeal. So where do we even begin with writing a good cover letter?
Just like with your resume, it needs to be tailored to the specific job and company you're applying to.
Research?
Research. Learn about the company culture, their values, what projects they're working on. You want to show them that you've done your homework.
Right, like you're actually interested in them, not just any job.
Exactly. And, instead of just listing out facts and figures, try telling a story.
Ooh, stories. Love a good story.
Right. It's way more engaging.
So it's a chance to connect with the hiring manager on a more personal level.
Yeah. And you can also use the cover letter to address any potential concerns or gaps in your resume. Like if you're changing careers, you can explain why and highlight the transferable skills you have.
So it's like addressing the elephant in the room. Like, hey, I know this might seem like a jump, but here's why it makes sense.
Exactly. Transparency is key.
Wow, this is great stuff. I feel like I'm learning so much. Okay, so we've covered resumes, cover letters, visual presentation, tailoring. Before we wrap up, do you want to just quickly recap like the key takeaways here?
Sure. I think the biggest thing to remember is it's all about presentation
Okay,
and personalization.
gotcha.
Yes, content is important, but how you present that content can make all the difference. So don't be afraid to get creative, tailor your materials, and really let your personality shine through.
Awesome. Okay, I'm ready for the final round. Okay, so we're back and ready for the final part of our resume deep dive. Now, before the break, you were talking about thinking outside the box. Like, are there any less conventional things we can try to really make our applications stand out?
Yeah, absolutely. I think sometimes we need to go beyond just the traditional resume and cover letter. Especially if you're in a more creative field, you might want to consider putting together a portfolio.
A portfolio.
Yeah, it lets you actually show examples of your work rather than just describing it on paper.
Oh, that makes sense. Like if you're a graphic designer or writer or something like that.
Exactly. It allows you to showcase your skills and your style in a way that words just can't.
Okay, but putting together a portfolio sounds like a lot of work.
Yeah.
What are some things to keep in mind?
Well, first of all, focus on quality over quantity. You don't need to include every single project you've ever worked on. Just choose your strongest pieces, the ones that really represent your best work.
So it's like a highlight reel, almost.
Yeah, exactly. And make sure it's easy to navigate, visually appealing. You don't want it to be a jumbled mess.
Right.
And of course, tailor it to the specific jobs you're applying for. So if a company is looking for a web designer, make sure your portfolio showcases your web design work.
Makes sense. So it's like you're creating different versions of yourself, highlighting the skills that are most relevant for each opportunity.
Exactly. Now, another tool that often gets overlooked is LinkedIn.
LinkedIn, I thought that was just for like networking.
It's definitely great for networking, but it can also be a really powerful tool for your job search.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Think of your LinkedIn profile as like an extension of your resume. It's a place where you can really flesh out your experience, your skills, your personality. Make sure you have a professional headshot, highlight your accomplishments, and, be active on the platform. Connect with people, join groups, participate in discussions.
So it's not enough to just like create a profile and forget about it.
Yeah.
You actually have to use it.
Exactly. And a lot of companies actually use LinkedIn to recruit people now. So by having a strong profile, you're basically making it easier for them to find you.
That's a good point. It's like you're casting a wider net.
Now, here's one more strategy that you might not have considered: a personal website.
A personal website.
Mm.
Really? Isn't that a bit much?
It might seem like overkill, but it can actually be really beneficial. It gives you a platform to showcase your work, your personality, your brand,
Hmm.
in a way that you can't really do on a resume or a LinkedIn profile.
Okay, I see what you mean. It's like your own little corner of the internet where you
Well,
can control the narrative.
exactly.
Wow, this is amazing. I'm starting to see resumes as just one small piece of the puzzle.
Right. And all of these things work together. Your resume can lead them to your LinkedIn, which then leads them to your portfolio or your personal website. It's all about creating a cohesive brand.
I feel like I've gone from resume novice to resume ninja in just like an hour.
Haha. Well, it does take time and effort to really put all this together, but I think it's worth it. It can really make a difference in your job search.
For sure. Are there any resources you recommend for people who want to learn more or maybe get some help with their resumes?
Oh, absolutely. There are tons of great resources online. Websites like Indeed, LinkedIn, The Muse, they all have articles, tips, even resume templates. And don't forget about career counseling centers. They often have people who can give you personalized feedback.
Perfect. We'll be sure to link to all of that in the show notes. Any final words of wisdom for our listeners as they embark on this resume writing journey?
Just remember, the resume is just the beginning.
Right.
It's your ticket to the interview. So make it count, be confident, be yourself, and good luck out there.
Well said. Thank you so much for sharing all your expertise with us today. This has been incredibly helpful. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next time for another deep dive.